Welcome to the fourth and final lecture in the series on improving and succeeding at a small high school. In this section, we're going to be going over my tips and tricks for succeeding when debating for a small high school. These are strategies I used in high school to achieve the success I did, as well as some things I wish I would have tried that I've learned now in college debate. So hope you enjoy it. The way I'm going to break it down is it's kind of going to be broken into two main ways I analyzed debate while in high school that helped me succeed. So the first one we're going to talk about is controlling the debate. Now, there are a whole bunch of ways to do this, and regardless of whether you go to a big or small high school, this is kind of a goal. But the way you do it when debating for a small high school is kind of different. So it's important to point out you often, when debating for a small high school, don't have the resources to constantly change your strategy. And so instead, you should pick a strategy and roll with that strategy. Now, it may change over the course of the year, like you may change advantages, may change like the text of the plan, etc. But the strategy you pick really matters. And I'll break this kind of up into two different ways. So we'll talk about being affirmative first. This is especially true when you're on the affirmative. So when you're affirmative, less ground is definitely your friend. What you want to be trying to do is choose an affirmative area where there is little literature, where the literature primarily flows affirmative, and where you can have such a grasp on your idea, on your affirmative, and on the literature surrounding it, that you know what's coming. So these should be probably smaller AFs or even large AFs with like overwhelming public support that have little dised ground, where you know what the core diseds are, you know what your strong answers are, and you know that most people will either try to respond with topic generics, which you have a good strategy against, or we'll have to have only like one or two specific strategies because those are the only strategies that really exist. So, for example, a good example of this would be when I was in high school debating on the arms sale topic. The small little sliver we chose was child soldiers. So we knew like topic generics aren't really great. Like, yeah, sure, the military industrial complex might be hurt a tiny bit by changing child soldiers, but it wasn't like a huge change, so that didn't really matter. What are counterplans going to do? It was like the only real specific counterplans were like the aid counterplan, which we had a very specific angle against. And then there'd be like other strategies like impact framing or whatnot. But for the most part, child soldiers was an area where we could have our little sliver of the topic, be very specific on that sliver of the topic, and won a lot of rounds because we knew that area better than the opponents because we debated every round. So that's kind of how you should approach doing affirmatives. The other way, an alternative would be if you pick like one of the mainstream apps, which is what I did my junior year after going to camp, where I just went with a high school labor app. But even there was like increased specialization. So it was like the advantages I rolled with were like BioD, so like bioterror, medical, biomed, and climate. So I had very specific advantage ground, very specific. I did a ton of research into those areas. That was kind of my sliver of the high skilled labor topic. The app had some specialization to individuals on H5 or on H5 visas that would be using those and being for those specific skills. So it's like, even if you use a big affirmative, take your sliver of the topic and make it your own. So like take your little, like take the high skilled labor act, take a big act, say on this year, take a Clean Water Act and make a specific sector and have that sliver or sector be the part you focus on. So that are my tips for being affirmative. Being negative, we're going to talk a little more about because it's different. I would say more generic strategies are probably your friend with enhanced adaptability, right? You don't always have the resources to go out and cut a new disad for every week, nor should anyone expect that. It's like you probably have one or two coaches plus you and maybe one or two other debaters doing the research. You don't have the time, you don't have the resources, like you have a life. So it's not going to be like you can go out and cut new disads, new strategies every week or every tournament like some larger schools with lots of assistants can do. But what you can do is take the generic strategies you get from over the summer, from camps, from open evidence, and enhance their adaptability and specificity. So you can take a generic strategy, say this year, like maybe the state's counterplan, and be really good at debating the state's counterplan, but have enhanced adaptability. So instead of just having it be generic, like just another off to read, like the state should do the plan, have adaptability. So changing process of how the counterplan functions, changing which like the order of the states doing it. Have like specific process perm answers that your way. So instead of, you take a generic strategy and you increase it and use adaptability to adjust it to rounds. Another example would be if you take the federalism DA, and obviously everybody's going to be cutting a bunch of links to all the different apps, but more than that, you cut apps or you cut links to specific like bills that may be involved in affirmatives. So you take like anything that changes like a clean water bill, like you cut a link to that, so that then it's like any app that has that kind of a bill or any tie with it, you have a link to. So it's not like, because you won't have the resources or time, especially at the beginning of the season, to have links to every possible affirmative. But if you have like slivers and adaptable strategies from your generics, then you should be able to succeed in those debates. The second kind of tip I'd say is know yourself, your opponent, and your judge. So I'm going to read a quote from Sun Tzu here. It says, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle, which was his take on how to win battles in military strategy. Now, in debate, there's one more facet that needs to get added in there, and that's the judge, which is why I included them in the titles. You have to know yourself, know your strategies, know your arguments. This is why in the last lecture we talked about argument maps. It's very important to understand your arguments and be able to articulate them effectively. Next is knowing your opponent. So having done some looking into like what have they read before, using the wiki to find out what kind of apps they're doing, asking for disclosure so you know what affirmative or what they negative like 2 and R's they've been going for at the tournament. So you have a general idea of the arguments they wrote. And lastly is know your judge. And this is the one that Sun Tzu doesn't talk about, because obviously in a battle, there's no one judging the winner or loser, but in a debate round, there is. And the judge is ultimately the one who will determine whether you win or lost. You could know everything about your opponent, but if you don't know anything about your judge, you can make arguments that just aren't appealing to them. And so you should do your time to look at look at their paradigm, analyze, adjust your strategies in a little bit, or adjust them and adapt them to what the judge is going to prefer, what their paradigm, what their preferences are, so that you understand your opponent, know what strategies you want to make, and then adapt those strategies to what kind of arguments your judge wants to hear. Now, it may not be that you can completely change strategies because you don't have the arguments, but there are ways to adapt your strategies to the judge, and that's what you're trying to want to do. So maybe they don't like big impacts. All right, well, let's read like a small impact them to our disads, like a softer, less high magnitude, more like real world impact. Maybe they prefer critical arguments. All right, is there a way we can turn our disads into more critically based impacts? Like this hurts certain people groups, or this does environmental damage and hurts animals, or things of that nature. Maybe they prefer high magnitude impacts, so then you make sure you're reading those. Maybe they don't like impact framing debates. Well, then you can characterize your affirmative or your negative strategies in different light and adjust accordingly. So there's ways to adapt your strategies, and you'll learn more of those as the more you do debate, but those are also things you can use some of the skills we talked about in the previous lectures to record yourself. How did I say this? Talk to your coach. Is there a better way to say this to appeal to this kind of judge? So it's always a learning process. But if you know your arguments, know what your opponent is likely to say or has been saying, and know what your judge wants to hear, you have a better vision going into the round on how to adapt your strategies and to create a winning strategy come the 2NR or 2AR. So the last kind of way I want to talk about this is how I would do pre-round delegation. So, and we'll go through prioritization schemes before disclosure and after disclosure. So before disclosure, there's kind of 2 big things you should focus on. So first is you should know your side, right? Know, are you affirmative or negative? And once you know that, what are your preferred arguments? So let's say you really like the set call K and you're negative. You're like, all right, great. We're negative, we're likely to read and potentially go for set call. So now you know your potential strategy. Then read your judge's paradigm. Okay, this judge isn't a big fan of critiques. All right, we may have to change our strategy there and go to a different preferred argument, which now aligns with the judges. So maybe they really like counterplans. All right, so we're going to read a private actor counterplan and a politics dissent with like a lobbyism or lobbyist and link and internal link scenario. So you adjust it, and now you know your side and you know what arguments you want to read. Then after disclosure, you can determine what arguments you're going to read in the 1 and C. Does my strategy still hold up? No, maybe they're like, it's a court's F. Okay, well then private actors doesn't really do anything, or we have to adjust it to say private actors have to sue certain agencies, etc., and then be ready to have a fiat debate or change it into private actors suing the states for not following through or something of that nature. So it's like you determine what you read, to make your adjustments based on what their strategy is. So that is the second leg of adjustment. The first was when you're changing to what the judge wants. Second is you're changing to what your opponent's going to do. And then you make your slight alterations to your preferred strategy. The same is true if you're affirmative, you know your side, you know your affirmative, you know what AF you're going to read your judge's paradigm. Is that going to be the AF you want to read? Yes. All right. Tell the negative what the AF's going to be. Ask for past 2 and R's. Let's say they really have been going for T a lot and you're reading a smaller AF. Well, now you know the 2 and R is probably going to be T. If they've been going for T a lot, even in other rounds, and you have an AF that's slightly smaller to avoid kind of core negative generics, etc., you know it's probably going to be T. So then you're really strategizing and have an idea going into the round, like we're probably going to want to overcover T and the 2AC, so that by the 2AR we have lots of answers we can go for and want to try to move the debate away from T. So it works for both sides. In the negative, you're adapting your strategy to what the judge wants and what the affirmative wants. Same on the AF, you might make slighter tweaks to your AF and then can have a vision going forward for like what you need to prioritize in the 2AC, 1AR, so you can set up the winning 2AR. So in summary, thank you for spending the time to watch this lecture series. I hope it's helpful. Please reach out if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. I'd love to talk to all of you. It's hard to tell over Zoom, but I'm a very friendly person. I love talking to people. You can reach out to me either with either of these emails, so davidkoster2002@gmail.com or kosterd1@msu.edu. I check both of them very frequently, so I'll be ready if you have any questions. I'll also be around at all the camp tournaments and helping with some of the camp processes. So if you see me there, say hi. Love to interact with you. If you have any questions or follow up, please let me know. But thank you for watching this lecture series. I hope it helps those of you that attend small schools to succeed in your small school environments. I really enjoyed it. It's like, now that I'm in MSU, there are benefits to a big school, but I always look fondly back on the fun I had, the friendships I made, and the way we did debate at small schools. So it's something to be proud of. Debating at a small school is definitely a worthwhile experience. And I hope the tips and tricks from this lecture series help you to improve and succeed when debating for a small school. So thank you so much.